Hi crafters, this is Cindy B from mrsbscraftroom.blogspot.com here today with video number 4 in our video series, and we are going to be making a cute little doghouse card using the Create a Critter cartridge. We are going to be using the doghouse and the dog on page 35. And we'll be using a lot of these little features, layers and things here. So let's get started. Okay, so on our gypsy, we're going to select the 12 by 12 mat. And once we're in the mat, we are going to start selecting our pieces. So what we want to do first is create our card base. And the card base, let's see, to create a critter, the card base is going to be made from the shadow feature on the cartridge. So I want to select the shadow button, and then I want to select the shift lock button because the doghouse is the uppercase, and here we find the doghouse shadow. So we'll go ahead and select that, and we're going to select it twice because we're going to make a card with that. We're going to weld those together and make a card. So let's go back to the mat, and you see, oh my goodness, they're so small. So let's go ahead and make those a little bit bigger. Now the size we want to make these, each, there we go, let's see what size they are. So each one needs to be 5.64, so let's do that, 5.64, and by 5.38, there we go. Okay, so there's our first one, and let's make our second one 5.64. 5.38. Okay, so one of the things that we want to do, let's ungroup those so we can move them independently. What I want to do first is flip one of these over so that when I create the card, even though they look exactly the same, I want to make sure they are exactly the same. So I'm going to go ahead and flip this particular one over so when we make the card and we weld them together, they'll layer properly. So select your image, go to the Advanced tab, and we want to select the flip key where the arrows are going, this flip key in the center here. There we go. So now we've flipped it. Now what we want to do is we want to weld the top of these houses together so that they create the card fold. So I'm going to select the turning tool, and I'm going to start turning that house until I think it's probably at the right angle, which I think that is. And I'll select the other house and the turning tool and start turning that one to meet that house. Let's see, it needs to go a little bit more. There we go. Let's see if perfect. Okay, so what we want to do now is scooch those two together, and we want to make sure they're exactly the same so that we don't have a bump or anything on the part that we're going to weld together. So the way we can do that is under the Basic tab, there are these top X and Y numbers. So what we want to do is when we select one of the houses, we see that it's at 5.19 and the Y is at 5.77. So if I select the second house, we want the second house, the same, the Y to be at, what was the first one? 577. So I want this one to be at 577. So I'm going to go ahead and increase that to 577. So now I know they're both exactly the same together and they're positioned properly. So let's go ahead and group those. Group, 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 and when they're all in blue, then we'll hit the ungroup button again to close off that group. Go to the Advanced tab, select the weld button, and let's take a look at that. Now you see how when I welded that, we still have a cut down the center. So what that means is I have not scooched them together properly. So I want to go back to my Basic tab. I'm going to ungroup them. I'm going to select one of the houses. I'm going to scooch it together a little bit more. All right, let's see. Now we'll group it, close the group off, go back to our welding feature, and take a look. And now you see that the line in the center is gone. So now when it cuts, it's just going to cut the outside base. So now we've got our card base created. So what we want to do next, let's scooch that all the way up. What we want to do next is now create the doghouse, the layer to lay on the front of the card. So now we've got the base of the card made. Let's make the layer of the card. So what we're going to do is go back to our cartridge and take off the shadow feature, So now we're going just to use the layer portion of the card. Go back to the mat, and this one we're going to size at 5.33 by, there we go, 5.33 by 5.38. There we go. Okay, so then we're just going to leave that part in the lower right section of our mat. So we've got the upper card base and we've got the first layer. Now I want to create the dog to go on the card. So I'm going to create another layer on my mat. All right, and we'll go to layer 2. We'll go back to the cartridge, and now we're going to pick the little doggy. So the first thing we're going to pick is the actual dog layer, or the dog base, which is the same key. And let's go ahead and size him up. Let's size him the right size. We want him to be, let's see, 3.37 and by 2.76. There we go. Now, one of the easy ways to go ahead and pick all of his other layers is once we have him selected at the right size, make sure he's highlighted, go back to your keyboard. Now let's start selecting our layers. So if we select layer 1, there's his little face. We'll click on him. Then we'll select layer 2, and his hat, we'll select that. Then we'll go to layer 3. And there's his little number 1 for his hat. And those are all of the layers that belong on the dog. So we'll go back to the mat, and now they've all come in at the right size. That's a really super cool feature on this. I love that. So let's ungroup all of those so we can move them independently. We'll want to place them around the mat so that we can cut them in the colors that we choose. Okay, so now we've got our dog, and the last thing that we want to do is create one more layer. And on this layer, we're going to actually layer the dog house. So again, we're going to go back to our mat, and we're going to select, let's see, I want to select the doghouse layer again, which is this one. And let's see, is that, no, I want to select the, that's not right. I want to select layer 1. There we go, the little front of the doghouse. Let's bring that in, and we'll go ahead and size that up, and that's going to be sized at 3.37. Whoops, where'd he go? There we go. And so he should layer right inside of that little house there on that shadow feature. And then we're going to select, let's see, leaving that highlighted, I'm going to go ahead and go back to the cartridge and select the roof feature, which is under layer 2. So here we've got our roof. And back to our cartridge. We're going to ungroup those, move the roof up there, the layer down here, so we can cut those separately, and we're ready to go. So if you notice, we can see each of our layers in between on the different mats, so we can kind of position these to make sure they're the right size, which they are. And we're ready to cut this out. So I'm going to go cut this out, and I'll be right back.